The next morning your belly was full of breakfast and you were in a pleasant mood. You hoped the rest of the day would follow suit. Initially you didn't have any plans for today, but your friends roped you into meeting up to go into town later. Since Cove was finally back home, Miranda and Terry couldn't wait to come down to the neighborhood. Having a nice daydream? You blinked, pushing all your thoughts away and returning to reality. Your mom was watching you with a teasing smile. So, what's on the agenda today? I'm meeting up with some people. Well, I hope you and your friends have fun. Don't get into too much trouble. She winked at you. You both knew your moms wanted you to enjoy every bit of this summer before all the big changes started. I'll try. But before you go gallivanting around the town, could you bring the mail in? I'm finishing up putting the dishes away over here. All right. Thanks very much. As soon as you were outside the front door, you couldn't help but see Cove and his dad standing around in the road. They noticed you, too.
Hey.
Hey there, Risa. Cove smiled lightly and waved. When you began making your way over, he added, Hi. Hi, Cove. Hi, Mr. Holden. So, what are you up to today? You held up the envelopes in your hand. I was getting the mail.
Right.
And we're meeting some friends in town in a while. You looked at Cove and nodded in agreement. Sounds like a plan to me. Mr. Cove stretched his arms over his head. My boy and I have just been waiting around to see what the new neighbors are like. It was definitely his idea. I don't know how you're not interested in this. It's big news. Besides, it'd only be polite to greet the new folks in town. Maybe it'll be a single dad and his son. You've been here too long if seeing a new person rent a condo is what you consider an exciting development. Yes, I'm dying to see the newcomers. Your response was just a shrug. I don't want to meet them. Well, anyone has got to be better than the last tenants. Your response was just a shrug. You weren't concerned either way about it. If I run into them, okay. If I don't, I won't think much of it.
Right.
Fair enough, especially with everything happening to you this summer. On the topic of what came after this, you tuned Mr. Holden out momentarily and looked at Cove. He nodded understandingly. Mr. Holden took one more glance at the currently vacant building and sighed dramatically. When he turned back to you and Cove, his whole body seemed deflated. There's no sign of them, and I still need to head over to work soon. Cove gave his dad a few reassuring pats on the back. Okay, I promise to keep an eye out. I can text you if anything happens. Really?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, only until I have to meet up with Terry and Miranda. Would that work? With a wide grin breaking out on his face, Mr. Holden looked absolutely thrilled to have his nosiness enabled. That works. He moved to firmly place both hands over Cole's shoulder, fixing his child with a firm stare. Son, you are my true ally in this world. Mr. Holden stood up straighter, letting Cove go. He looked reinvigorated. Okay, with that settled, I'll go make some money. That's always been the one thing I do best. Mr. Holden headed off to the garage with a big wave goodbye. Cove smiled the whole time you both watched his dad leave. You really liked Mr. Holden. Mr. Holden was one of your favorite people. Cove's dad was kind of a bother. You had mixed feelings on Mr. Holden. There were ups and there were certainly downs. As soon as he was out of sight, Cove sighed lightly. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, just not looking forward to waiting. Guess I'll be hanging around the street for a while. Good luck. See you later. Bye. I'll stick around to see the new neighbor. Why don't I stay to see the new neighbor and keep you company? Okay, see you later. Offering him a small wave, you flashed him a smile. You figured the new neighbor would be by any minute now. Yeah, see ya. You walked off towards your house, double-checking that you retrieved all the mail and went inside. Your mom met you shortly after you closed the front door.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. She started shuffling through the envelopes idly, and you took that as your moment to head upstairs to your room. Time quickly passed while you relaxed in peace and quiet. When you looked at the clock, you noticed that it was close to when you had mentally planned to head out to town. You got yourself together and left your home, waving to your parents along the way. You were surprised to still see Cove outside. He was sitting hunched over on his front porch step, busy scrolling through something on his phone. The neighbors haven't moved in? As you approached, Cove's gaze flicked up at you, his mouth pulled into a half-hearted smile. Nothing's happening yet. I'm sorry. He wasn't expecting that response. Cove put his phone back in his pocket. For what? You've had to wait out here the entire time. I thought they would have come by now. Me too. It's gotta happen sometime. Yeah. The neighborhood was quiet, and you sighed contentedly, closing your eyes and feeling the light breeze. Eventually, you both perked up at the sound of a car. A taxi followed the noise, turning onto your street. Cove's eyebrows raised at that sight, and he sat up straight on the stoop.
Oh?
This has to be them, right? I hope so. Now that they were here, you couldn't help but feel just a bit curious. You wondered what kind of person would be living in the neighborhood for the summer. The taxi pulled to a stop as you expected in front of the now empty condo. It was on the same side of the street as your house, a few buildings further up. Without getting to his feet, Cove tried leaning and tilting his head to get a view of the passenger door as it opened. The single occupant exited the cab. Huh? You could feel what Cove was in that moment. After the last renters, this new visitor was definitely not exactly what you'd expected. Oh my! It was a young man, had to be close to your own age. He was dressed fully in an eclectic black, white, and grey outfit. Even his side-swooping hair matched the scheme. The only other pop of color was from something that couldn't easily be fashioned into a submission. A pair of dark brown eyes, which you caught when he looked over at his audience. Hello, folks. Who might you be? We're the neighbors. A smile already prominent on his face curled further. It was cocky, but you didn't get the impression it meant something adverse. Hallelujah. You and Cove shared a familiar look with one another, bewildered even further. The color-coordinated man left it there, however, and with a firm click he shut the door of his ride. Then he turned his back to you and retrieved a large, unsurprisingly black suitcase out of the trunk. Continuing on with his own business, he strolled forward and lightly tapped on the driver's side window with his knuckles, asking for them to roll it down. When it opened, he leaned down and rested his arm on the edge. You assumed he was thanking the driver for getting him there, considering he slipped them a tip during the brief chat. They shook hands, and then he pushed himself up and away from the taxi with both arms, giving the driver room to leave. The taxi pulled away, rolling carefully down the road and out of sight around a corner. The new renter had officially arrived. He left his suitcase on the ground, out of the way of the street, and sauntered over your way with the confidence of someone who had been invited to join. Cove finally stood up to greet this person. You followed suit. I'm Baxter Ward. It's excellent to meet you, neighbors. You were standing on the side, and he was approaching from. When Baxter got close enough, he offered his hand to you first. You shook it. You offered him a low high five. You held your arms open for a hug. You kept your distance. Baxter gripped your hand firmly to give a satisfying shake. I'm Risa. Hello, it's nice to meet you too. Hey Risa, I'm quite keen on getting to know you better this summer. We could be good friends. Okay, and you are? He lifted his hand out to Cove next. Cove instead crossed his arms to express his rejection of that idea, still eyeing Baxter carefully. I'm Cove. Baxter's whole demeanor lit up for unknown reasons. His eyes shone as he studied Cove a moment.
Really?
Now wait, is that a nickname or your real name? It's just my name. Cove spoke mildly, having given that explanation many times in the past, but it clearly charmed Baxter all the same. He tossed his head to one side with a laugh. Your parents knew exactly what they were doing. I can't imagine a more fitting name for the face I'm seeing. Cove, that's gorgeous. It's really not. No, I agree with you, it suits you. That's a lot, considering you're talking to a stranger, Baxter. You didn't know what to say. After a noticeable pause, Baxter caught on that he made you both uncomfortable.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. It wasn't intended to mean more than it did. I like your name, but you don't have to mind that. I'm patently against stepping on anyone's toes. He chuckled to himself. It seemed like there was some extra meaning hidden there in his words, and you noticed that Cove raised an eyebrow, picking up on that too. Baxter didn't even open his eyes to see your faces, to know he had some filling to do. He stood up straighter, striking a slight pose with the position of his feet. I'm a ballroom dancer, hence the phrasing. A dancer? Oh, I don't know much about dancing, but that's pretty cool. It's not hard once you get the basics down. Cove didn't look convinced at all. Baxter took that as a cue to keep talking. Well, whoops. He grinned in a way that was rapidly becoming familiar to you. If either of you are ever looking for a partner, I'm available. Cove frowned at the overt forwardness. Thanks. I'll pass, I think. I'll take you up on that offer sometime. I'd rather not. I could probably show you some moves. You didn't answer the question. Baxter nodded understandingly and let the subject go. After that, there was a lull in conversation, and Cove attempted to fill it. What made you decide on Sunset Bird? Oh, yes, well, my parents rented a condo, so I had a place to stay while I'm off for a semester from college, and not living in the dorms. There was a playful glint in Baxter's eyes as he continued. Ideally, they wanted to send me somewhere that wasn't too exciting, but lucky for me, they picked the wrong street, considering the two of you live here. Cove was practically reeling over how Baxter found a way to fit comments like that into every single topic thus far. Why do you keep doing that? You don't know us, but you talk like you already do. Cove spoke, firm yet genuinely confused, and Baxter smiled cautiously. I don't feel the need to keep words of praise to myself, and when I say something, I mean it.
See?
Plus, what's the point of spending my off semester alone? The best part of being somewhere new is getting to interact with new people. And am I honestly the first person who's acknowledged you're attractive and intriguing people? Sure, you're hidden away in a tiny tourist trap, but still. Baxter crossed his arms. After studying your faces for a few more seconds, he decided to continue. Am I only trying to score a hookup or get a romantic fling started by saying those things? No. That isn't the point of speaking well of others. I was raised better than that. Though, would I be fussed if that's what my words led to? Also no. I am flexible, not a surprise, and type of person you could just punch. I can back off with the lines if you don't like the attention, but I would like to be friends if we can. Cove wasn't sure how to respond. He glanced at you, and he continued to look at your face when he spoke. Thanks for answering. I don't think I'm interested in that. Maybe not the friend thing, but the other part. Doesn't bother me. I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that with me. Finding it pretty entertaining. You probably annoy a lot of people. You stood there unsure how to react. Baxter looked at you and smiled apologetically. I'll keep it in check. Shifting his weight to his other foot, Baxter tried to move forward. So, since you were both already out here, did my arrival interrupt anything? Definitely not. You smiled and silently agreed. You laughed in a conspiratorial way. You looked away nervously. You told Baxter that you were both waiting to see who was going to move in. You looked away nervously. So far, your day had consisted of sitting on Cove's front step, waiting. You didn't want to tell Baxter that, and especially now that you could feel his eyes on you. Baxter didn't understand your response, but he chose not to question it. Instead, he smiled politely when you glanced back at him. Well, if either of you are free, I'd be thrilled to hang out this summer, but we can save the schedule talk for later. I should get my things inside. He gave a small nod of the head and flashed you both a dazzling smile. Goodbye for today. Cove simply waved goodbye. Bye. Bye. Baxter then turned on his heels and strolled back to his suitcase, picking it up and bringing it into his condo. You and Cove were silent as Baxter unlocked the door and disappeared into the house. With him completely out of the scene, Cove let out a long breath. I don't know how I'm going to explain that guy to my dad. He burst into a fit of laughter, trying to imagine the conversation. At least the job is done. We saw the new neighbor, and now we can go meet up with Terry and Miranda. Yeah, we should get going. You gave Baxter's condo one last glance over your shoulder. You were looking forward to seeing more of him. You thought he was charming. You were not interested in him. You weren't sure how to feel. You thought he gave a pretty bad first impression. You decided he definitely wasn't someone you liked. You weren't sure how to feel. Honestly, you didn't know if you would ever come to a conclusion about him. Baxter was just so different. Turning your attention back to Cove, you pushed all thoughts of Baxter aside. You both started making your way towards town. A little while later, you and Cove reached a main street in town. All of a sudden, you stopped walking. What's wrong? I think I felt my phone vibrate. You dug your cell phone out and looked at it with a satisfied grin. There was a new message. You opened the new text from Miranda, and all you saw was, I can see you. Immediately from where you stood, you started swiveling your head around. You couldn't spot Miranda anywhere, but she did send you more messages. Haha, I see you looking. Oh my goodness, Miranda. Where are you? Come on, really, Randy? Oh, we call Miranda Randy, eh? Oh, these are the options I could check. I see you looking. Where are you? Where indeed? The message was sent and you were back to looking around, scanning for any sign of movement and familiar faces, but they were still invisible. Cove looked at you carefully, raising an eyebrow. Miranda, come on out. You sighed at the ridiculousness. You burst into laughter at your antics. You sent your own joking text. No, just a subtle smile? You want to keep hiding, Cove and I can just go and do our own stuff without you, is what you decided on. You smirked, hitting send on that message. Cove looked at you curious, raising an eyebrow. What's happening? Before you could even begin explaining anything to Cove, you both snapped your attention to the yelling from across the street. And there you saw Miranda and Terry coming out from behind the backside wall of the grocery store. They both started waving wildly to draw even more attention to themselves. Cove took a step in their direction. He grinned and waited for them to get closer. Laughing and arm in arm, the girls stopped only to look both ways and then rushed across the empty street.
Hi.
Aw, she's cute. Hi, I hope you weren't waiting too long.
Hey, buddies.
Hey, buddies. Hi. 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 That joke was not funny. I'm amazed. How did you appear out of nowhere like that? Hey, I'm so happy to see you two. I thought you both knew better than to jaywalk. Wordless to you waved. They giggled at that. Terry waved back at you, and Miranda looked pleased that you weren't upset by her joke. Terry then closed the distance between her and Cove and crushed him in a painfully tight hug. You're finally here! It's been so long! What took you? He did his best to eke out a reply with his chest being compressed. Sorry. Eventually she let him go. Terry looked at him with a beaming smile, but Cove was distracted, rubbing his arms. Standing there, Miranda shifted her weight to her other hip. She watched Cove patiently with a bashful smile. Does everyone have a crush on Cove? Welcome back. Welcome back. Thanks. It finally felt official. Everyone was together in one place. From here, you weren't sure how often you would have another afternoon like this. They didn't either. Cove! Terry poked Cove square in the chest. You're gonna have to get me your schedule by this time yesterday.
No way.
Not really possible, Terry, but I can say as soon as I know. So far, work hasn't said anything, but I can tell you I'm busy with Orca activities. Orca? When Cove wasn't at his part-time job, or pursuing his athletic and academic interests, he volunteered for the Ocean Restoration California affiliation, Orca. Aww. The group focused on cleaning up beaches and removing pollution from the ocean. Cove always loved the sea. It didn't surprise you one bit when he started getting involved with them. It was Cove's activity. You joined Orca too after learning about it. You were an Orca member and introduced Cove to it. It was Cove's activity. Their big smash event for this year is coming up, right? It's coming right up, isn't it? Yeah, there's not much to do before then, but I'm kind of looking forward to the fundraising push. You nodded, wondering how the event would turn out this year. I know you can do it, and even if it goes really bad, it'll still look good on a college application at least. That's true. Hey, guess what else? We don't have to stand here to say stuff. Let's go, I would like a meal now. Perking up, Cove nodded in agreement. Excited by that plan, you smiled. The four of you headed into town, happily chatting the whole way. The only decision left to make was exactly where to stop and eat. The rest of the afternoon and evening passed by in the blink of an eye. When night fell, it was time to head home, and you parted ways with Miranda and Terry. You and Cove reached your neighborhood without event. It was late enough that your out-of-the-way street was dark and silent. You were walking tiredly after such a long day. You strolled with a skip. You ambled along. With every step, you knew that your fate was being sealed. Your feet were going to be sore well into tomorrow. It was taking a lot of mental focus to keep up and walk alongside Cove. As you peered at his face out of the corner of your eyes, you wondered why he felt so distant to you. You knew Cove well enough to know this wasn't new for him, but this felt more than usual. For a while, Cove silently stared ahead and left you alone with your own thoughts. It surprised you when you did hear his voice after all of a sudden. He still wouldn't look at you. It feels weird coming back to the neighborhood and trying to get into things like they're the same. And they're not. They've changed. They're still changing. Your mouth felt uncomfortably dry all of a sudden. It was true. The things that kept the people you knew together were starting to disappear. Each person had to make their own priorities and their own path now that it wasn't set for them. You thought about your own immediate future. If you had to choose in this very moment, you wanted to go to school full-time, to go to school part-time, to work full-time, to work part-time, to focus on time that's not school or work. And that was the basics. For yourself, you wanted to work on self-improvement on your own. Take some time to relax. Try to figure out what you truly want, and work on self-improvement. And relax, and that was all. And for that, you wanted to, my goodness, stay local, go to a different part of the state, go out of state, go abroad. Social anxiety. It'd all be happening so soon. You started to prepare for what was coming. You hadn't begun to do anything about that yet. And you'd been open about your situation and everyone knew. And you'd only spoken about this with friends and family close friends. You'd kept it all to yourself. Now you wondered what Cove had in mind. You'd heard him consider some things for his future, but it was never anything that would have counted as a real plan. Making it back home, you both stopped in the middle of the street. Cove sighed. Awkwardly, Cove rubbed his arm and looked at you. It was like he knew what you were thinking. I don't have any plan for any of that. The future stuff, not really. But all I know is that I'm not going to decide this summer. You're not? No, I can't do it. It's too fast. I'm not ready. So I'm gonna stay here, at least in Sunset Bird. I'll probably move out of my dad's place. He looked away from you now. You could tell he was carefully putting his thoughts together.
I don't know.
Maybe I'll know what I want for myself by fall or next year, or maybe I'll never have a plan. Life will continue on with whatever's happening. I'm not gonna crush myself trying to have everything figured out by a timeline that someone else had set. I just can't do it. His brow furrowed and his tone was tense. It was clear how much expectations were weighing on him. That sounds very you. You nodded in agreement. I wish you the best. You shrugged. You wonder why he chose to confess that to you. You nodded in agreement. Cove exhaled the tension he was feeling away. He left things there. Cove looked up to the sky. It was dotted with stars. He smiled.
See you tomorrow.
Well, I'll see you tomorrow, Risa. Then Cove started walking away, but you remained there, frozen in the middle of the street. You watched him and wondered, how many more times will he be able to say that he'll see you tomorrow? Finally, you turned towards your own house. You vowed to yourself that you would make the most out of every moment you had this summer. Oof. That was a long recording session. Like, super long. Just because yeah. Okay. Oh boy. Okay.